This is Chapter 5 of the Tatum Chronicles. You can find a hard copy of the Tatum Chronicles at www.thebookpatch.com. www.thebookpatch.com. In early 1985, 2 medical flight crews from Fort Stewart, Georgia, were sent to Honduras. We were based at Pomarola Air Base. Our crews were sent there in an attempt to circumvent the Boland Act. What you're hearing are the readings from the flight plans from those flights in Honduras in years before anyone ever heard of the name Oliver North, anyone ever heard of the name Iran-Contra. April 10th, 1985. We were tasked with flying 6 coolers marked medical supplies to San Lorenzo, Honduras. While we were flying on 9 April, Dr. Gus, who was General Gustavo Alvarez, delivered 6 coolers to Dust-Off Operations. Dust-Off is our medical evacuation operations. I opened all 6 coolers to check the contents. I only counted the package of cocaine in one of the coolers. There were 110 packages. Major Hethcox, the aviation support commander, sent his administrative officer, Lieutenant Willett, to Dust-Off Operations to fly one leg of the flight as my co-pilot. As I suspected, Hethcox was curious as to why we were flying so many missions, and many of them unauthorized by his command center. We loaded the coolers marked as medical supplies and headed for San Lorenzo. Upon arrival, we hovered to a C-130 cargo aircraft that we had met the previous day. The C-123 was based out of El Salvador and was tasked with carrying the cargoes from San Lorenzo back to El Salvador. I noticed something familiar as the C-123 pilot approached. It was Barry Seal, an old friend. Barry was holding a jar of olives in his hand as he walked up to the chopper and greeted me. Barry had promised me weeks before in Panama during a meeting with Harari, Noriega, and North to see that I got some olives. I had visited the base liquor store, that's called the Class 6 store in military terms, at Howard Air Force Base, but it was out of olives, as was the commissary. I told him I didn't expect curb service. He gave his cherub laugh and invited us to a cafe for a Coke. That's Coca-Cola, folks. The crew joined us as he commandeered an Air Force truck for the short drive from the airstrip to the village. Barry and I walked outside of the cafe so that we could talk privately. I asked Barry to level with me concerning the drugs and who was involved. I felt that Barry Seal was the only person I had met to date that I could get a straight answer out of. The following is what Barry Seal told me concerning the drugs in general, and more specifically, the destination of the drugs, which we delivered to San Lorenzo on the 9th and 10th of April, 1985. This is what he said. He told me the Contras needed weapons for their rebellion against Sandinistas. When the CIA approached the Contras in the early 80s, they promised total support in weapons, training, and money required to sustain the operations. This is what prompted the Nicaraguans to begin open recruiting against the Ortega-led Sandinista government. But as time went on, the U.S. reneged on their promise to the rebels. Not only did the U.S. cut money needed for medical and food supplies for the Contra camps, but they also refused to provide the weaponry needed to stay alive. This left the Contras in a hell of a spot. William Casey met with Adolfo Calero, and it was decided that the Contras would get the much-needed money and weapons in exchange for cocaine. Casey put Ollie North over the project. North, at the CIA's prompting, recruited Seal to oversee delivery of products, and a man named Ramon Navarro of the Medellin cartel to train the Contras in the manufacturing process. Calero was the point man for the Contras. He dealt with Washington and others as needed. The Contra leader Enrique Bermudez was tasked with getting the cocaine kitchens built and protected. Bermudez had solicited 3 other Contra commanders to assist in this project. Their names are Commander Fernando, Commander Franklin, and Commander Marlin. Ramon Navarro supplied the cocaine paste and raw coca leaves to the Contras. The U.S. provided the equipment. It was delivered to the camps by Chinook helicopters, CH-47s, out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. the 159th Aviation Battalion. It was Barry's job to deliver the finished product and monies to destinations as dictated by Mr. North. Barry gave me the names of his various drop points and told me to be very wary of North. I already knew that. We had nicknamed him Jake the Snake at Fort Campbell when I was with the 160th. "He'll give up his mama if he has to," was his comment concerning North's lack of honor. He also gave me the names of U.S. officials, politicians, and drug enforcement officials involved in the cocaine enterprise. I asked Barry to be exact about the shipments so that I could better understand. He used the 6 coolers that we just delivered as an example. He said that these coolers and the coolers delivered the previous day would be taken to El Salvador. From El Salvador, they would be taken to a site in Southern California. There, they would be distributed in rock form called crack. I made note of his comments and his boss hog list, as Barry called it, on the back of the flight plan concerning his specific flight. The notes were made the evening of 10th of April, 1985. You can find the notes and the list of the boss hogs on the back of that flight plan. The following day, 11 April 1985, we delivered personnel and supplies to several Contra camps. Among the Contra soldiers that we carried was the Contra leader in charge of the North camps, Enrique Bermudez. We flew several sorties, making for a very, very long day. I would only see Commander Bermudez on 2 more occasions. The last time I would see Bermudez alive would be 1991, outside of a hotel in Managua. Enrique served as a faithful commander during the Nicaraguan Revolution on behalf of the Contra revolutionaries against the Sandinista government, which was led by Daniel Ortega. But beyond his fighting ability was his loyalty to Vice President Bush and the CIA Director Bill Casey. It was Commander 380, which was Bermudez, who would ensure the safety of the cocaine manufacturing facilities co-located in the Contra camps. When the revolution ended and there was a democratically elected president, Enrique Bermudez rightly expected a prominent position. However, President Chamorro, Nicaragua's new president, was not comfortable with Commander 380. She felt he did not possess the political qualities she desired in her cabinet. In 1991, Bermudez pressured President Bush to convince Chamorro of his political value. Chamorro resisted. Bermudez, desperate to position himself, decided to use his ace in the hole. Bermudez told Bush that if he did not receive a prominent government position, he would expose Bush. He would expose North, and he would expose the rest, all involving their cocaine trafficking enterprise in Honduras. As Enrique Bermudez walked down the street in front of the Intercontinental Hotel in 1991, a shot rang out, and a bullet entered the back of Commander 380's head. I departed the area of operation before he stopped twitching, knowing that the mission was complete. The message passed to the White House was quite simple. The playing field is clear. On the 13th of April 1985, I scheduled an instrument training flight to La Mesa and then to Tela. Major Rodriguez needed another night flight to Waspam and Rousseros. I carried 8 passengers, all medical staff from the Joint Task Force Hospital at Tela, a beautiful beach town in the Caribbean. While the others slept, I walked to the airfield and met Major Rodriguez. We flew to the 2 Contra camps and returned with 8 coolers. We stored the coolers marked medical supplies in a broken-down hangar on the airfield at Tela. The Major told me that a C-123 should be there in the morning to pick up evidence. He also told me that 350 kilos of cocaine had been stolen from international drug dealers based out of Colombia. He further told me that it had been secured by the Contras in Costa Rica. He pointed to 4 of the coolers, proud of the theft and the fact that he had possession of the cocaine. An armed guard was posted outside the hangar. I felt pretty numb. He must have thought me a complete idiot to believe the trophies of war story he kept trying to pass on to me. But who could I tell? It even involved the Vice President. I just kept telling myself, keep good notes, Chip. Upon returning, I was called to JTF Bravo Command Center. There I was met by the commander of the Army Aviation Assets in Honduras. He told me he knew I was being directed by someone other than military officials, and he demanded to know who directed my flights. I told him his security clearance simply wasn't substantial enough for me to answer his questions. He handed me a message that confirmed his suspicions. I've attached a copy of the message to the flight plan dated 13 April 1985. When I returned to dust-off operations, I called North and told him that the military authority was getting wise to the Pegasus flights. He said he had a copy of the Twix and would handle it. On the 19th of April 1985, I was called by Major Rodriguez and told to deliver the map I had made of Waspam and Roos area 2 weeks prior to a CH-47 Chinook out of the 159th Aviation Battalion, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The Chinook was scheduled to arrive in La Mesa at daybreak on the 20th. The 159th was actually a branch of the 160th Aviation, which is now known as the Night Stalkers, and was then. That Chinook was scheduled to arrive in La Mesa at daybreak on the 20th, so I gathered my crew, gave excuses of a dental problem, and no fuel available to top off at Pomarola. I was able to get the authority to fly by the J3 operations for Joint Task Force Bravo. We flew to La Mesa. Unfortunately, there was no fuel there either. When we arrived, the refueling point had shut down for the night. We went to the hotel. The following morning, I met the aircraft to give them an orientation. I was on board as it was taxiing to a new parking and refueling point. Suddenly, the main rotors meshed. The top of the helicopter was torn from the aircraft, throwing all of us violently around the interior of the aircraft. I was drenched in hydraulic fluid. My back had been injured. I was able to get to a hangar and get washed. I returned to my hotel room for 2 days. I then reported to a hospital at JTF Bravo to find I had sustained a compression fracture of the spine. I was flown back to Fort Stewart, Georgia. In Chapter 6 is the epilogue. I'll run down the players. You'll find out what happened to them. Hold on to your seats, folks. There weren't many left to testify. Tower, this is Dustoff 712 on final approach.